Good morning. It is 9 o'clock, and so we want to keep our time certain. And I just want to thank everyone that are coming, or a good group that came in today. This is the Richfield League of Women Voters Candidates Forum, and my name is Susan Rosenberg. I am the president of the Richfield League of Women Voters. It is the League of Women Voters' mission to promote citizen involvement in government and increase public understanding of major public policy issues. We believe that an informed citizenry is the foundation of an effective government. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan with respect to candidates and our parties. We do study and take positions on issues. This forum is not a debate. Candidates will take turns answering questions, first those prepared by the League of Women Voters and Richfield members, and then written questions from the audience. And there are people passing out index cards and pencils in case you, as the conversation goes on up front, if you think of a question or something that you would like some further information about, write it down on an index card. I won't guarantee that we get all of them answered, but we will do our best to try by the time certain that we will end this is 10:30. The forum is being taped for rebroadcast on cable TV, so we ask the audience to be as quiet as possible. Please hold your applause until the end. No applause or outbursts from the audience will be allowed from this forum. One warning will be given before the forum is terminated. Disruptive persons will be asked to leave. Order of speaking will be determined by drawing numbers, and the order of answering questions will rotate afterwards. And I think Donna has done that with the three candidates. Each candidate's introductory remarks will be 1 minute. League questions will be answered in 1 minute. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer audience questions. These times will be strictly enforced, and we do have two timekeepers right in front, and I think the candidates see the signs. One of our members is serving as a timer and will hold up a warning sign or stop when its time is up. Members of the audience are invited to submit questions on index cards, and like I said, you'll see people walking around with them. The League of Women Voters reserves the right to screen questions. Our intention is in good faith to select questions that represent the interests expressed by the members of our audience and those who submit questions. Questions on one issue or similar issues will be consolidated and rephrased. All written questions become the property of League of Women Voters. If a listener perceives that an issue has not been adequately addressed, League of Women Voters urges the listener to contact the candidate directly following the forum. And I do urge the candidates to kind of hang around after this is over, because a lot of people will want to maybe ask more questions or kind of ask you to be a little more broader in your response. And it's a really good time to connect out there. So another thing that we do ask is that you turn off your cell phones and pay attention to what's going on. This is a time to learn. So I'm going to turn this over now to Donna Drummond. Excuse me? Oh, you want me to speak? Oh. Speak directly in the mic. And the little button on there, you see the green, when it's on, that means you're on. And you turn it off when you're not speaking. But speak directly in the mic. It's good for the taping. It's also good for all of us here in the audience to hear everything that we need to hear. So anyway, I will turn it over to Donna Drummond. She is a member of the League of Women Voters, and she will be the moderator for the day. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Susan. One of the four candidates could not be here this morning and so was allowed to submit a statement. And so I will read that statement on his behalf. Brant Kruger. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the League of Women Voters for their continued support of these candidate forums. For many people in town, they are the top means of getting to know the candidates a little better and play a significant role in helping them decide who they'd like to vote for. It's for that reason that I sincerely regret not being able to be there in person. My wife is scheduled to receive an award this evening, nationwide recognition from her employer of her leadership and outstanding work in teaching dental hygienists from Minnesota and around the country, and I couldn't be more proud. As important as this forum is, I wouldn't miss her big moment for the world, and so I apologize again for my absence, but as much as I love Richfield, I fell in love with her first. So while I cannot be there today, I pledge to answer any and all questions asked at this forum and publish those responses online. Over the course of the last couple of months, I've sat down over coffee with many residents and talked with many more neighbors at their doors from across just about every walk of life. While the individual concerns with the city varied widely, they all seem to be coming back to issues of communication, from simple things like when will the construction of 66 be complete, to more complicated things like why are so many developments around town being delayed, or what exactly are the benefits we'll be getting from projects like the band shell or the underpass. Whatever the issue, there's a feeling out there that the city isn't communicating as well as it could be. Lack of communication feels like a lack of transparency and breeds mistrust of government, which I've encountered plenty of as well. Residents with opposing viewpoints don't feel like they're being heard, and while I can't guarantee we'll always agree, I'll always be willing to listen. As part of that renewed focus on communication, transparency, and accountability, I'd like to see increased coordination and cooperation between the city and the schools. After all, the number one reason most people choose where to buy a home is the quality of the schools. From my experience working with the district's Fiscal Planning Advisory Committee and the District Technology Advisory Committee, and from speaking to former and current council and board members, it sounds like the relationship between the schools and the city has been a bit strained lately. Once again, mainly revolving around issues of communication. I'd like us to return to a time when the board and the council met biannually just to keep each other informed on what the other is doing and to look for opportunities to work hand in hand to make Richfield a desirable place to live and raise a family. I have a strong background in technology and can help us prepare for the challenges and opportunities that are heading our way. Our code and long-term plans need to be forward-looking and not geared toward the businesses of 20 years ago. At the same time, we need to account for an aging population that may not be as tech-savvy or ready for change. Then again, the number one growing demographic on Facebook is the over 60 crowd, so they might be more ready than you'd think. And finally, I'm all in on Richfield. My wife and I have lived here for 12 years. We both work here in Richfield, and our two girls both go to Richfield Public Schools at Sheridan Hills Elementary. I've often joked in the past that if we hit the lottery, we'd bulldoze the house and rebuild right there. I'm not sure that's true anymore, but only because in my door knocking I saw a really nice house for sale on Oak Grove. My name is Brant Kruger, and I hope to earn your vote on May 23rd. I want us to keep moving forward as a community, and I'd like us to do it together.
Donna, I've had a suggestion, because when we're looking at you through on the video, you're in a dark shadow. Does that bother everybody, or do we think that that would make a difference during the taping?
Can I move
And would
over
you want to
one?
stand up over here, or
Oh, I can do that.
that, because I mean, the light is much better over here. We were just thinking about for the tapping. If you're okay with standing up and addressing the council candidates over there.
Push the button.
We'll begin with opening remarks from the candidates. Again, you'll have 1 minute for each response. And the order of speaking is, I have a random number generator that changes up the order for each question, so you're not always following the same person. So the first person to start will be Mr. Troutman with opening remarks and introduction.
Good morning. Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters. For hosting this forum. It's an honor to recently become a member of the League of Women Voters and appreciate the work that they do. I'm running for city council because I'm a third generation Richfield resident that's raising the fourth generation here of my children, not just in Ward 1, but in the house that I grew up in. I couldn't love Richfield more, and I think now is at the time and the opportunity to serve, one, because we're at a point of generational change. The decisions we make now are really going to have an impact for the next 20 and 30 years. As a business owner, as a nonprofit leader, and someone that's been active in the civic life of Richfield, I have the vision and the passion and the inclination to serve the city, and look forward to talking about our issues.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
I'm Gordon Hanson, and I also want to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing the forum today. Well, I've known Richfield my entire life. I grew up on 60th and Oliver, just 2 blocks north of Richfield, but I fell in love with the city when my parents would come and shop at the local markets here in Richfield. As a young adult, I chose Richfield as my home, moving into the Fountainhead Apartments, where I lived for 4 years. Then I got married. My wife had a condo in Plymouth. I was renting, so naturally moved up to Plymouth. But I never lost my love of Richfield, and even in that absence, I stayed involved in community activities here. When we wanted to buy a single-family home, there was one place that we looked for, and that was Richfield. So we purchased a home in Richfield where we've lived for about 22 years now. In that time, I've gotten very involved in Richfield civic activities, all the way from the Woodlake Nature Center, Planning Commission, the Housing Visioning Task Force, and many other community endeavors. I love this community. I see the City Council as an opportunity to serve the community.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Zach Olson, running for City Council. I want to thank League of Women Voters as well, and thanks to all the fine residents coming out today. I'm a subplant, so I'm not a fourth generation, or I haven't lived here for 40 years. I've lived here for 10 years. I come from northern Minnesota, a small town called Fergus Falls. I learned my work ethic from there, and my parents, I helped them celebrate their 40th anniversary, so family is important to me, and that was my reason for running here. I see a lot of young families moving into our neighborhoods. You see a lot of the older folks downsizing or moving on, and we're seeing young couples move in, and I think that's really important to harness that and grow that and keep those families here, just like the Troutman family. And often when I tell people I live in Richfield, nobody knows where it is. So I think we're lacking that identity. I think we can get creative and have some fun ideas to make Richfield that place and well known. And we can do that through growth, and my time is up. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. We'll move to the first question, and you may have answered part of this question with your introduction, but why are you running for office, and what will be your major priorities if elected? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Hanson.
Well, I'm running for office because I believe in community service. I've gotten extremely involved in the city of Richfield. I find a great satisfaction in working to make Richfield a better place. I've served for 20 years on the Friends of Woodlake Nature Center board. I served for 9 years on the Planning Commission, helping guide sensible development in the city. Served for 2 years as a chair of the Planning Commission. Served on the Housing Visioning Task Force. So I've held many leadership positions within the city of Richfield, but I've also never forgotten it's very important to stay in touch with the community at a grassroots level. Be involved with people where you can talk with people one-on-one. A lot of candidates will say things like, I want to open up and have better communications. I want to listen to the people. I think there's no better way to listen to the people than to get involved in the community at a grassroots level where you can hear directly from them and hear their concerns, their passions, and their hopes for the city.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Me. Why I'm running for City Council, but some of the priorities, the development, particularly in the Penn Central corridor, is a real opportunity. As a business owner that makes payroll every week, and as an attorney that has a background dealing with development projects, I understand the pain points of developers, and I have a vision for how we can bring in the right kind of businesses that are going to make Richfield the livable, walkable, enjoyable community that, frankly, a lot of people already think that it is. One of the great things about running for council is that you get an opportunity to talk to so many of your neighbors, and the resounding message from all our neighbors is we love Richfield. There are a lot of people that really like this city, are devoted to the city, and being able to shepherd and steward that legacy and put us on a path towards growth to the future is why I'm running.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Thank you. I kind of answered it in my opening, but I'll start. So why I'm running is I see a growing youth coming into our communities. I want to represent that voice. I think that voice is missing a little bit today. I see that family mix. Gordon mentioned passion, and I totally agree. I think people that live here, I'm one of those. They live here. They're passionate about the community, and I'm so passionate about it. I wanted to serve, just like Gordon. I believe this is a service to the community, and you know, and then I want to see ideas. You know, I spent 8 years with Apple Computer, where entrepreneurship and ideas were the normal, and that's how we generated growth. That's how we generated all kinds of great activities and great places to be, and can house our passion. So that's basically why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second question, should affordable housing be included in either new or redevelopment plans in the city of Richfield? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Olson.
It's a really good question. I supported the Crossroads concierge plan. I think they did a lot of good for the community. They fixed it up. They brought new blood to our community. They brought new residents, just a different, and then they brought a different flair. So I think affordable housing needs to be part of the discussion. We have a lot of apartments in Richfield already, an extraordinary amount, and I think it all plays into that balance. We need to have a balance of redevelopment. There's a lot of aging buildings in this community that, you know, the Richfield basically grew up overnight, basically in the 50s, and stood up all these buildings, and now they're getting a little dilapidated. So we need some redevelopment. I believe in affordable housing, but it's got to be a good mix. We got to draw families that want to live here and redevelopment. So it's a good mix. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, as we all know, that affordable housing is actually becoming a crisis here in the Twin Cities, where the available inventory of affordable housing is declining all the time. This question is related to new construction. I served on the Housing Visioning Task Force, where we drafted policy and presented to the City Council, which adopted the policy we proposed. And I generally believe in a mix of 80% market rate, 20% affordable is kind of a starting point for opening the discussion. You know, when you look at each individual project, sometimes you might need to kind of adjust that ratio a little bit, but I think that 80-20 is a really good starting point for including additional affordable housing with new development. You know, it's a crisis. There's that inventory of affordable housing is shrinking. So I think that Richfield definitely needs to be a partner in answering the issue of affordable housing. Ultimately, of course, though, you know, it's kind of a regional issue that has to be dealt with regionally.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, I think we have a dual mandate and obligation as a council and as a community. One, to protect the naturally occurring affordable housing that we have and preserve that. And two, we want to continue to create a vision for prosperity and growth with our housing stock here in Richfield. We have done historically a really good job of having a mix of affordable housing in our community. We have a diverse community, and it's becoming more diverse in lots of different ways. I want to praise the city council and the deal that they've struck recently. They found a great developer in Aon, and Aon is a serious developer. They're a large developer. They have the resources to get this recent project done, but they also have a mandate to be mindful of protecting the naturally occurring affordable housing. And so I think that's great, and I'd look to add that and lend my voice to that kind of smart, progressive development.
Okay, thank you. Our third question, with the city's comprehensive plan update underway, would you advocate any specific policies to promote or guide development in the city of Richfield?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. With the city's comprehensive plan update underway, would you advocate any specific policies to promote or guide development in the city of Richfield? So for this question, we'll start with Mr. Hanson.
Well, with regard to the city's comprehensive plan, I think, you know, when you talk about the issue of housing, what I really believe in is life cycle housing for all generations. I think a community is only a community if you find people here of all generations. I've oftentimes said that I want to create a traffic jam. I want to create a traffic jam with 3 types of vehicles: little kids with scooters, young families pushing their baby strollers, and senior citizens with their walkers. So I want that comprehensive plan to address that issue of housing that is going to meet the needs of people at all stages of life. To me, that's the most genuine community. Also, if you want to look at commercial development, I think that I want there to remain a place for small independent businesses, and I think that Penn Avenue corridor is a great location for that, so I would hope the comprehensive plan would address that.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I agree. Penn Avenue's been a sore spot for many years. I've heard about it ever since I've lived here. It seems to be moving at a snail's pace, so I want to see some revitalized areas there. And the number one thing that I'm seeing is we're ripping out houses out of our Richfield. So we're landlocked, and there's no growth opportunity for us, farmlands we can take like Maple Grove and Woodbury, and we're ripping out houses to redo streets, to do commercial development, and I think, you know, that's family opportunities right there. That's families that can't participate in our soccer fields. They can't participate in our schools. I've heard the discussion about, you know, the affordable housing at Crossroads that took out children from our schools, but then we're willing to take out 12 houses to redo a street. And so I want part of that comprehensive plan to be very cognizant of keeping our houses intact as much as we can while promoting that growth. We have areas that are designated for business or mixed-use space, and we need to leverage that as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Well, I would echo the great comments of the other candidates and agree. I think we all share a common vision for development for small business owners and for the Penn corridor. Particularly, my law firm, my law practice focuses on helping just those kinds of businesses. And in addition, continuing to shepherd and safeguard the kind of community, which again, as I talk to folks, overwhelmingly when I talk to people here in Richfield, I say, well, what's top of mind for Richfield for you? Is there anything that you're really upset about or anything you don't want to change and you really like to let me know? Overwhelmingly, people just say, I love Richfield. I don't have a number one thing that I'm really upset about. There's concern for school development. One thing that the comprehensive plan could focus on is not just our schools improving. I think our schools are improving, but really getting that message and marketing that, looking at how the city could partner with the school board to really get the message out about our great public schools. And as open enrollment creates a more competitive environment, we want to keep our kids in Richfield here and open enroll other students, great quality students coming to our schools.
Thank you. The next question, as a member of the City Council, what would be your spending priorities? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Troutman.
Sure. Well, in a city as diverse as Richfield, there are multiple spending priorities, but public safety is always important. Education is important. Now, of course, the school board is responsible and sets the budget for our public schools, but would certainly be open to exploring ways that we could partner. And I know we have, but even collaborate more. Looking to develop smartly and effectively and strategically. There may be some opportunities over in Lindale by Richfield Lake, depending on how the development happens there, using HRA funds to acquire property there, to develop that, make sure we have exercise good leadership there, might be an opportunity for us.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I agree. I think safety, I think safety is the number one priority. Police, fire. I know when I met with, there were some open bike discussions, bike forums, and I liked seeing the comprehensive plan that focuses on safety for bike riders and pedestrians alike. I think that's important. We need to focus on safety in the Maslow's hierarchy of things. If people are safe and they feel comfortable, then we can grow and thrive, and people want to be here and hang out. And then part of the other spending has got to be enabling our business community to thrive. I believe, I like Gordon's comment about small businesses and local businesses. We need to hear from them and see what we can do as a city to bring more business or bring a vibrancy. Can we brand our city better that would help their business? Say, I'm on Penn Avenue in Richfield, and that's recognizable to them. Whatever that takes. So safety and business growth would be my two priorities for a spending.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I think for city spending, I would certainly like to see investment in our parks, make our parks, they're great parks, but make them even better. I concur with my fellow candidates. Public safety is a top issue, economic development, so that we see continued economic development, more businesses being attracted to the city of Richfield. And a couple of my fellow candidates have mentioned kind of the public branding image. I support this. I think this is a great opportunity for collaboration between the city and the schools, is marketing the great things about this city. Now, people in this room today, we all know how great Richfield is. We have to bring that message to the greater community, the greater Twin Cities community, so that we can attract more residents, we can attract more businesses who want to come here. And as a marketing professional, I would really like to use my talents in promoting the great brand image of this city and letting the rest of the Twin Cities know about it.
Okay, thank you. You may have touched on the answer to this question in your previous answers, but again, what can the city do to attract new businesses? And for this question, we will start with Mr. Olson.
I get to go first. I agree with Gordon. I think it's a branding issue. And I didn't know you were a marketer. I'm a marketer as well. So I did some marketing for Apple, and then I've started 2 businesses focused on digital marketing and helping businesses with their online presence. I think it's an issue. People don't know where Richfield is. They don't know what it's about. So if you got local businesses or businesses that want to open up, they don't know where it is or where to find them. And then again, back to my point about the spending issue, we need to figure out ways that keep the community safe and keep it a little bit guarded, but also open it up and make it easy for all that surrounding populace around us to get in and get out and spend their money here. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Troutman.
In order to brand something, you need to have a really clear vision and message. And as a small business owner who works with small business owners, one of the best way to attract small business owners is to have great restaurants and a great energy and culture around the neighborhood where you are, because you want to work and you want to go and recreate in that same place that has a great energy. We are 1 or 2 restaurants away from exploding in terms of having a reputation for being a great restaurant location. We have Lin 65 amazing chefs who came and located in Richfield. Pizza Luce has come. Kadao is a great Vietnamese place. Ida's has some of the best falafels in the Twin Cities. Andale is on the Food Network every other week with their great food. So we get 1 or 2 more restaurants, and we just start to create a culture and an energy. Right on Richfield Lake, there's an opportunity with the current developer to put in just that kind of restaurant. I think encouraging those businesses are going to create a culture and an energy that's going to help Richfield sell itself.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, for the Penn Avenue corridor, what I would really like to see is I'd like to see that we have a lot of great small independents there, and I'd like to see us attract more. There's actually an association in town called the Metro IBA, Metro Independent Business Alliance. I'm a citizen member of that particular organization, and these are the small, truly independent businesses. I think we should partner with the Metro IBA, Metropolitan Business Alliance. Also, a number of years ago on the Penn Avenue corridor, I organized an event as a private citizen called the Avenue of Opportunities, where we opened up the shops, the vacant storefronts and offices that were for lease, and we had an open house format where prospective entrepreneurs, small business owners could tour the avenue, take a look at the spaces available, and decide if this was the right spot for them. A number of the spaces were rented actually during that event, and I know the Avenue of Opportunities is an event that I do plan to repeat.
Thank you. We'll go with the final question from the League. Recently, the Richfield League of Women Voters completed a study and adopted a position in support of organized garbage collection in Richfield. What are your views on this idea? For this question, we'll start with Mr. Hanson.
Well, I'm a person who I kind of like the free marketplace where people choose businesses that they want to patronize. Yet I also know for some industries, a regulated contractor is the way to go, like utilities. There's issues on people pulling kind of from both sides on this issue. I've actually heard some people suggest maybe even putting this issue up for a vote for the citizens to decide. And as a simple policy statement, I guess I would support that. Now, if we go to organized garbage collection, there's some things I'd want to be a strong negotiator for. One would be a citywide trash collection day where people get rid of those larger pieces of junk. I'd also want to look at the recycling practices of the contractors to make sure we're handling those in the most environmentally responsible way, and also look at the labor practices of the different haulers. I know I've heard some of the haulers pick up drivers at temporary labor offices as opposed to hiring direct hires, simply for the reason of avoiding labor costs, benefits, and living wages. And I don't think we should be complicit in that sort of activity. So I want to get the right hauler that has responsible labor practices.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
I would agree with almost everything my fellow candidate had to say. As an attorney, corporate attorney, I negotiate contracts for a living, and this would be one of those contracts I would look to negotiate. It's a complicated issue because I know people feel passionately on both sides. I'm an advocate of small business owners and appreciate the individual haulers, their businesses, but municipal garbage is doesn't destroy competition because larger contractors still compete between the cities. There's accountability with the council and the annually renewing or biannually renewing contracts. The savings are pretty significant. Instead of having 10 or 12 trucks going down a street, you'll have one truck going down one street. That's hugely efficient, not just for the hauler, but for the city, for our roads, for public safety, and significant cost saving. And the cost saving is really important for our budget.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
I'm pretty strong on my views. I don't think the city should be involved in the business of trash collecting. You can't be for small business and then take away the competition. Yes, it would take away competition because now you have one instead of four. And if I don't like my trash carrier, I can choose another. And that's my right as a citizen. I believe in that, giving the choice to the citizen. And then the truck argument, I hear that all the time. We might as well just get rid of FedEx and UPS too and just have one mail truck delivering mail and one food truck delivering pizza, etc. It's going to happen. I think they do a yeoman's effort. I've gone through 3 trash collectors. I've landed on Aspen. They've been outstanding. I love their customer service. That's what I would promote. I would promote they're going to get customers by doing a good job. You know, we can have discussions on the labor practices and be cognizant of that, but ultimately we got to let that free market work itself out. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now move to questions submitted by the audience. And the first question is, do you support the band shell in Veterans Memorial Park? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Olson.
I'm a little torn on this one because there are areas around us that we can use. I don't understand why the need for a band shell. It's a beautiful park. People can run around. We have playgrounds there. We have areas to go. So to build a band shell at a cost to taxpayers that's going to get used during the summer for what, concerts and things, I don't know. I have to look at more closely at what it's going to bring because at the cost of it, I wouldn't support it right now. I'd have to see at what it would bring to our vibrant community. If it's going to bring people here and it can help brand us, then maybe that's up for discussion. That'd be my choice. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I really tend to always have a fondness for programs and amenities which bring people together in gathering points. I think when we build communities within our community, we kind of strengthen that fiber of who we are as Richfield. So I really like that. And I think the band shell kind of fits into that mold. Now, I've been a little bit concerned about the challenges with raising funds privately for the band shell. I think it does need to show some legs in that respect. But as a general concept, I love things that bring people together, and I see the band shell as something that does that.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Well, the band shell, I believe, has already been voted on, and so it's been really controversial. I'll wade into it. Knowing that it's a thankless thing to wade into that other people have made hard decisions on. But I'm in fan, just like Gordon said, of anything that brings Richfield citizens together. incidental ties when you go somewhere and you meet people you weren't expecting to meet. It's one of the key ways you create a community, and you create a community that feels livable and where you feel connected. So any opportunity that we have to bring people together, I think is really important. Also, any opportunity we have to make Richfield a destination for people in the surrounding community to come hear music in the park or see a film in the park. Those are opportunities for people to come and spend dollars here in Richfield and get to know Richfield. I support that. It seems like there's some communication challenges perhaps with the surrounding community, and I recognize it's not in our ward, so it's easier to support something in other people's wards, but recognizing that, I think it's great and support it.
Thank you. The next question is related to airport noise. Comment on the livability issue of airport noise in Northwest Richfield. And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Troutman.
Well, I can say I've lived in multiple places in Richfield. I've lived on 74th and 2nd and 66th and Humboldt, and the noise is more significant about a mile and a half further away from the airport because of the airport traffic. Now I'd support continuing to work with the commission to make sure, one, that the traffic patterns are rotated in an appropriate way and not simply going over one area, and where it's appropriate, seeking additional funds for noise insulation.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, it's an issue I hear a lot. I attend church at House of Prayer Lutheran, and a lot of the churchgoers lived on that east side and are right next to the airport, and I hear a lot that they complain about the noise, and I'm open to ideas. I know they tried doing soundproofing windows and things, and it doesn't seem to be working, so I think we're open to ideas. I think it's working with the airport. I think they've done a pretty good job, am I getting too close, of relegating their flight patterns. But ultimately, I tell people it's expected. If you're living in Richfield, we're right next to the airport. We're going to do everything that we can within our powers and work with the airport on that issue, and do the best that we can. But ultimately, we live next to the airport. That's what it comes down to. It's unfortunate, but thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I've always kind of lived in kind of under the flight patterns of the airport, living in South Minneapolis, 60th and Oliver, and now in Richfield. And so I'm very aware of the problems that we face. Of course, we're dealing with an outside agency, the Metropolitan Airports Commission, a non-elected body. But I think what's really important is we have a city council member who's going to be a strong voice in voicing the needs of Richfield to that agency. I know Minneapolis has a strong voice. Egan, I think, has a very strong voice. So what we need to make sure is that our city council member is somebody who, when our citizens have an issue with airport noise, that they're going to be going to that Metropolitan Airports Commission, and they're going to be just as strong and loud of a voice as Minneapolis has, as Egan has, as other surrounding communities have.
Thank you. The next question deals with commercial development. Many of the existing buildings are 1960s vintage. How flexible should the city be on zoning regulations and encouraging remodeling for new businesses? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Olson.
Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. Many of the existing buildings are 1960s vintage. How flexible should the city be with zoning regulations and encouraging remodeling for new businesses?
I'm assuming you're meaning like, I'm all for remodeling and bringing in outside investors into revamping some of those tired buildings, and so they need renovation, they need safety updates, etc. But in terms of, I'm thinking I don't know who submitted the question, like mixed use, or are you thinking like businesses on the first floor and apartments or condos up above? I would support that, absolutely. I just don't want to take any more homes and take any more condos out of this city. I've been looking at the next to like 16th and 17th Avenue there, where they're taking out 15 homes and they're putting in commercial space there. I don't know if I really agree with all that, but yeah, I agree with outside development, investment into those older buildings, and finding a compromise into possibly mixed use where we have the businesses on the first floor and condos or apartments and housing on up. Does that help? I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I know this is a very important issue for the Penn Avenue corridor because we have a lot of, older buildings that are built according to standards that we just simply wouldn't approve in this day and age. But today those buildings exist, and we have to, have to deal with what the situation is. I served on the committee that developed the Penn Avenue corridor guidelines, and I think for new construction, I think we want to have a higher expectation, and we need to be more stringent in what we expect out of those developments. But for the older buildings where we have to retrofit, I think we need to be a little bit more lenient in what we allow. I know when Wolf Central occupied the building up there on Penn Avenue, they were a little bit frustrated because the Penn Avenue corridor guidelines had just come out. The city was going to them, kind of with demands that we want to see you do this, we want to see you do that. And a lot of these things were somewhat impractical with an older building like that. So for the older retrofit buildings, I think we need to be a little more flexible in working with the situations that are there.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, I want to echo the word flexible. There's not a one size fits all solution. Specifically, I think when we're looking at bigger chain stores that are coming in, there are places where that's really appropriate and really helpful. Fully support Panera coming in, the shops at Lindale, taking that. I think that's a great place where we can have a more modern look, a more suburban feel. On the Penn Central corridor, I think it's important to recognize the character and the quality of a really walkable, beautiful urban boulevard. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be looking at redeveloping that. We want to have that kind of vision in mind. We had a Taco Bell that was there at that corner for years. God bless Taco Bell, but we have an amazing local restaurant that's gorgeous. And supporting restaurants like that and development like that is I think not just going to be good for our economy, but really create the kind of community that we want. Working with some potential developers here in that corridor now, I think we're having a good dialogue and would support that and support the vision that we have and make sure we execute on it.
Okay, thank you. This next question is related to the last question. Penn Avenue lacks depth that would allow parking. How flexible should the city be on parking zoning requirements? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Troutman.
I would say we have to be flexible. We have to be creative. We have to do what we can to get those businesses in and get them the parking that they need and be creative with solutions. I think as we're looking, not in the next 2 years, but the next 5 to 10 years, redeveloping the Penn corridor, looking at on-street parking might be something that could be helpful. Looking to, were opportunities to come up and the price to be right to create some parking situations that might be municipal parking situations. All looking at everything like that, parking is going to drive the opportunities for us to get the kind of businesses that we want in the corridor.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I also echo the idea of flexibility on that Penn Avenue corridor. I mean, it certainly doesn't do us any good to have all these empty storefronts up there. The old Brugger site, the old Flowerama site, now the old First National Bank of the Lake site. So I think we have to look at flexibility in that parking issue. And I would echo what Simon says. We might have to look at some additional on-street parking. Ideally, if we could develop some type of municipal parking, I think that would be very, very beneficial to the avenue because we have to do something to spur that economic development, make it an attractive place for business to locate. And if we have too many obstacles, we're going to have empty storefronts, and that's really not doing us very much good as a community.
Amen.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. We have to work with the businesses and understand what's going to help them grow, what's going to bring people here, and that's going to be that in and out. I have somewhere to park. Listen, I worked at Apple in Uptown. Now, Uptown is terrible for parking if you've been on that road, and people do not like paying for parking, and so it hurt our traffic to that store, and we hear it all the time. They'd say, I'd love to go to your store, but there's no parking, and I'm not willing to pay 50 cents for parking. So we have to have that solution and have people that it's comfortable to come in, they can find a spot to come, and they can spend money on the businesses, and that's going to help the community. That's going to help everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question, how would you foster cooperation with neighboring cities like Edina, Bloomington, and Minneapolis? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Hanson.
Well, I think we have to have that open dialogue with our neighboring cities, and this is a very important issue as illustrated what's happening kind of our Richfield-Edina border. I mean, we're seeing tremendous development happening in Edina with a lot of these high rises, and I think we need a person, who's going to be there at the important meetings, at the discussions of, with our neighboring communities. I know with the Southdale Library redevelopment, I attended the meetings over this past winter where they were discussing what would that development look like. And there were a lot of different proposals, ones that would not be too Richfield friendly, ones that would be much more Richfield friendly. I know I was there at those meetings because I wanted to voice my opinion that on that Richfield Xerxes side, we need lower scale buildings that are not going to have an adverse impact on our neighboring single family homes.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I think cooperation is a must. I think it's par for the course. We have to cooperate with our neighbors because we've got trails, we've got roads, we've got everything that's connected. We have to understand what's happening along our borders. What are their plans? How does that affect us? I've seen that. I've witnessed that. As Gordon said, on the west side there, they're putting up Onyx, that big. I mean, it's a massive apartment building, and I feel for those residents right there. Not from, that's going to be flooding that neighborhood with a lot of people now, and I worry about the safety aspect, and so that's probably, if they're going to be developing like that, we need to be concerned with, how are we keeping them safe? How are we partnering on community policing and crime, et cetera? But it's a must. It's par for the course. If you're going to be on the city council, you have to work with your neighbors. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
I would echo what the other candidates had said, and I would add specifically, part of being able to strategically plan together is to be in the know, and I would be open to exploring the possibility of an intercity relations commission where we had Richfield residents that were specifically tasked with attending and participating in forums and work sessions in other cities. So we had that real-time feedback and people that were particularly responsible for maintaining, building those good relations and helping Richfield extend its influence into its neighbors.
Thank you. For the next question, it deals with immigrant families. Richfield is a city where many immigrant families have settled in the last few years, particularly the Somali community. As you know, these families are large families with tremendous needs, from housing to language. What specifically would you do to make sure these families get the help they need? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Hanson.
Well, Richfield is a growing diverse community, and this is something I think for us to really celebrate. I want to create a welcoming community for people of all ethnic backgrounds. Now, when a new immigrant community comes into town, I think it's really important that we meet with them. We find out what their needs are. We can't just make assumptions what their needs are, but we have to have a genuine dialogue with all people to find out what their needs are. How can our community be a more welcoming place for them? And then build those bridges. I think what's going to make Richfield a great place is when we build bridges. And, we don't see people as subsets, but we see people simply as people who want a safe community, they want to be respected, they want to build that strength. And that's how, when we create that unity in the community, that's how we're really going to build a stronger Richfield.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Well, it's a privilege to have Somali neighbors, and particularly in this political climate, our Muslim community members have I think rightly perceived some persecution and some prejudice. And as part of the Human Rights Commission, it was our privilege to be one of the first cities to circulate, and this council passed a resolution in support of people of all faiths and all traditions. And as a Christian, it's my particular privilege to stand up for the civil rights of other community members. I have several Somali female friends. Almost all of them have told me in the last 4 months they've experienced particular persecution and strangers coming up to them and saying things that are not repeatable in a forum like this because of their faith. And we have an opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. We're glad for our Somali community members, and Somalia wajat lahai.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I mean, it is a privilege, and I see the diversity, and it's a great thing. And your background doesn't differentiate you. We're all Americans. We're all here. At part of my church, our opportunity is doing the welcoming as well. We're doing welcoming baskets and things, and welcoming them into our community and being that resource. I think that's, it's going to take some leadership on the city council to stand up and say that we don't stand for this, and then work with community leaders like our churches. I'm a Christian as well, and I appreciate that. I'm not mixing politics with religion, but it's okay to mix a little religion with some politics as well, because there's some standards and values there. And we can work with our community to develop that welcoming and encourage them to get more involved in our community. And I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question deals with time commitment. For those of you with young families or other community involvement, how can you assure voters you can dedicate the time needed for this job? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Olson.
That's a good question. I didn't mention it. So I have a wife. We're going to celebrate our 11-year anniversary. And then I got 2 young kids. I got a daughter, Audrey, she's 8, and a son, Meyer, he's 5. They both attend Sheridan Hills. So I get it. We're right in the middle. So we're right into baseball. We're right into dance and gymnastics and all those activities. And it can really pull you away. But, when I chose to step up and serve on city council, because I could commit, and I do believe in committing and that work ethic. And if I make that commitment, that's my responsibility. Yes, I have a responsibility to my family, but I live and work here. I work out of my home, and I work co-location downtown. So I have the time and the flexibility to be here and be available to the citizens of this community. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Well, it's a great question, and I also have a family. I have incredibly supportive wife, Jennifer, and two great kids. My oldest son, Justice, goes and door knocks with me, and being part of civic life is part of our family time together, and it's a great privilege to be able to do that. You don't want somebody in the city council who just has lots of spare time. That's not, you want somebody that gets a lot of things done in a day. I could not get what I get done without the team, the team of my law firm, the great associate attorney that I have, and office manager, and the people who support me and what I'm doing. I'm really grateful for their support, and were I fortunate enough to be the city councilor, I would continue to lean in even more to the great team that I have.
Thank you. Mr. Hansen?
Well, my family situation is that my son just graduated from Richfield High School last June. He's 19 years old. So that has freed up a little bit more of my time to be involved in civic engagement. Now, even when he was in school, I got involved in a ton of things: Wood Lake Nature Center, Planning Commission, Housing Visioning Task Force, Richfield Foundation. So I've always been a person who can get a lot of activity into my time. But I do think this is a good question, because being on the city council is a very, very important position. Now, there's the regularly scheduled meetings, like the regular city council meetings, that, of course, you have to attend, but there are many other meetings that you have to go to. I mentioned the redevelopment of the Southdale Library workshops that happened last winter. Those are meetings that, they're not going to take attendance there, but it's really important that Richfield has a city council member who is present at meetings like that.
Thank you. The next question deals with extracurricular activities at Richfield schools. The Richfield School District has a number of challenges. Many of the student programs lack funding due to the lack of discretionary funds of the families of the students. How can the city encourage more contributions to these programs? For this question, we'll start with Mr. Troutman.
Thank you. It's a good question, and this is a little bit of a complicated answer, because the city budget does not, the school board sets the budget for the city council. I'm very open to exploring opportunities where we can partner, and maybe programming might be one of those places to program or to partner. Also, using the platform of the of the council to be a bully pulpit and support for our public schools. I was talking with my former classmate, Richfield High School classmate, and Teacher of the Year finalist here in Richfield, TJ Statham, and we talked about a collaboration between the council and the school board to promote and market our schools specifically. And so things like that might be opportunities to create more resources, more exposure, and get more students into our Richfield public schools.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, kind of like Simon, I truly believe in collaboration between the city and the schools to kind of get more bang for the buck. So I think, Richfield is a community with great, great heart. I think the first step in collecting and generating funds for needs like this is simply to let the people know. And as a city council person, I mean, you're a spokesman for the city. I think as you go out into the community, as you attend city council meetings, let people know what these needs are. And I think that, we find a lot of generosity in this community. And so that's, I think, step number one. And then I think we need collaborations and sponsorships with outside organizations who are willing to partner with us and can provide funding, for endeavors like this.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, this it's home for me. My wife's a teacher. She's a Montessori teacher. She helped train Montessori teachers in her former life, so I get that. And we participate in the fun club that they have at Sheridan Hills, which is like a before school and an after school program, because we're a working dual income family, and we got to work till 6 o'clock at night, and that is extremely beneficial to have that program there. So I'm all for it, and I like the extra. I think maybe they were going with the question of extracurricular activities is in terms of maybe sports and things like that, and the arts. I support those programs too, because our if we focus on the kids and we can focus on families and getting them a good education and getting involved in the community, I think we all win. So, and I agree, and we don't set the budget, but we can at least participate in those discussions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, do you believe the city council should be a nonpartisan race? So without party affiliation, which it currently is. For this question, we'll start with Mr. Hanson.
Well, I definitely believe it should be. I'm running this race as a nonpartisan. I know on the ballot it's nonpartisan, but there's also a question of, are you running as a nonpartisan? And I truly am. I know a number of the candidates, we've appeared at a DFL District 50 event and a Republican District 50 event. And at both those events, I didn't know a lot of the people there because I haven't involved myself in a lot of partisan politics. Where I've involved myself is kind of in the heart and soul of the community, being active with Wood Lake, being active when my son was at Sheridan Hills, and with all the school activities all the way from Sheridan Hills on up to the high school. And so I'm running as a nonpartisan. They always say that there's no, when you're running a fire department, there's not a Republican or Democrat way of doing that. When you have a fire at your house, you don't care if the firemen are Democrats or Republicans, and we don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican when we come to put that fire out at your house.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, it should be nonpartisan. Unfortunately, it has become. We've seen the DFL get involved in certain races, and it's not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue solution-oriented task force, like Gordon was saying. It's okay to have those views and those positions, but at the end of the day, I'm here to serve my community, whether they vote blue, vote red, or vote in green or independent. It doesn't matter. I have to have that concern for the community and be a voice for that. So it should be nonpartisan. I don't shy away from my views, but we should get the partisan politics and the money out of those races, because it should be the community serving the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, I think two things. One, I think it's great that the race is nonpartisan, but even more than that, I think it's excellent that the council has a tradition of working in a bipartisan manner. That we've had counselors from different party affiliations and no party affiliations, and I think there's a great culture there. So I think preserving that culture is really important in terms of whether or not parties should be involved in politics or in supporting candidates. That's just people organizing however they choose to organize, and I think we want to encourage, and our Constitution encourages us to organize in any way that that we think is helpful to get our voice and message out. But I approve of the city's decision to keep the race nonpartisan and the cultural decisions that people on both sides of the aisle have made over years and decades in Richfield to preserve a bipartisan culture.
Thank you. The next question, you've partially addressed it with a previous question, but how would you address the city's changing demographics? And this could be racial as well as age demographics. So for this question, we'll start with Mr. Olson.
Yeah, great question, because it is changing, and we're seeing that turnover occur, at least in my neighborhood. We're seeing the younger families move in. It just takes leadership. It takes leadership to stand up, to say we are all Americans. We're here to support our community and build that, hopefully, a branded city that is welcoming and that people know and recognize and want to be here. It's going to take leadership to work with our community organizers, like our churches, like different library associations, etc., to bring those people into the fold and get involved in our civic lives and our duties. And yeah, I hope that answers the question. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I really support a community that's diverse both in ethnic background and in generational background. I think that's the real genuine community, is when you find people across the spectrum who find this as a place they can call home. My wife and I, we were really blessed to have been able to raise our son here in a great community like Richfield, having him go through the school system all the way from Sheridan Hills on up to the high school. Boy, I spent many nights at those baseball fields, and boy, if I could turn the clock back, I'd be right back there at those baseball fields, because this was a great experience. And so I think we really have to work hard in making this a great and premier community for raising a family. And I'm always going to be a very strong advocate for that. But I also want it to be a community, a comfortable community where you can live in retirement. And I think with that diversity, both generationally and ethnically, Richfield is going to be just an absolutely fantastic place to live.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, two quick things to the two issues. With regards to age, I think creating vehicles and mechanisms for whether that's a commission or for senior engagement. We have so many Richfield, such a tremendous asset to have senior citizens that now have some additional time and some additional bandwidth, and creating a culture and an opportunity. So many seniors participate, but to invite them further into civic life, I think it's an opportunity. It's a season in their life. I hope they do that. With regards to diversity and inclusion and equity, I think we'd all probably be in agreement in terms of our goals. In my particular background, I have, in my role as the Alumni Association president for my university, we took a board structure that was wholly non-diverse and took it through a process where they enthusiastically engaged in the mission of inclusion, and we saw the board change. I think focusing on that in our commission structure, increasing inclusion in that structure, and reaching out. I know our police department has worked hard to, there's a program called LEADO. I believe it's Law Enforcement Training Opportunities, where they engaged professionals from diverse backgrounds. They helped pioneer that program. It's not being implemented at the moment. I'd love to learn more about that and see that that happens and encourage their efforts in that direction.
Okay, thank you. The next question, do you support an ordinance requiring anyone selling a multi-unit building to first seek a nonprofit developer such as Common Bond Communities? And we will start with Mr. Hanson.
Looking at the Caesars Park property, I think that, that turned out really well. We had a nonprofit organization that's a professional development company come in, and they're going to invest in that property. But overall, I think we have to be a little bit cautious about implementing policies which may discourage investment in the community and the kind of revitalization of the housing stock. If we discourage it too much, developers are going to look at going to Bloomington, going to Egan, going to other communities, and so we have to be somewhat cautious about that. Um, I, um, I don't want to discourage investment because really millions of dollars come into the community to help reinvest, revitalize properties. And if we discourage those dollars, we just simply don't have those dollars in a public budget, or we don't have the capacity to add that on to our taxpayer rolls.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I agree. I think the question was for an ordinance to go to a nonprofit developer first. I wouldn't support that. It's got to be an open market, like Gordon said, but we have to be cognizant of our community and what's good for our community, but we can't turn away those investment dollars and turn away that opportunity, because that's a tight circle, and word will get out. They'll start telling each other, just don't even bother with Richfield anymore. So we have to have that precedent that we are open to those companies coming here. Of course, they're going to show us their plans anyways. I mean, that's part of the process. They're going to show us what they plan to do. We have to have a forum on it and decide and have a vote. So it's all out there in the open. It's no backhand deals or backroom deals, but I say we gotta leave it open and let the market help us. Thanks.
Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, I would agree with the other candidates. In addition to everything that they said, the challenges with requiring a nonprofit is there are good nonprofits and there are bad nonprofits and there are great for-profit developers and investors. And so we wouldn't want to have, I would think, a situation where people were turning to mediocre nonprofits and passing over excellent for-profit developers.
Thank you. This next question, Southdale, and this has been talked about a little bit, but Southdale area development has intensified over the last 10 years, adding thousands of residents and new businesses. However, some Ward 1 residents have opposed the size of these developments. Should Richfield capitalize on this new development or continue to focus solely on impacts to homeowners? And for this question, we'll start with Mr. Troutman.
Sure, that's a great question, and it's a tough question because the city has, I think, rightly advocated for the homeowners in that corridor there. I would be open to listening to residents, but I think our development opportunities really are the Penn Central corridor in Ward 1, and really focusing on that and focusing on the Richfield Lake, the great developments that are happening there, seeing that those are our immediate tangible goals and they won't require us to be so disruptive and invasive into our housing stock and our housing community. So I wouldn't want to shut any conversation down, but those are our priorities, those are our focuses, and that's gonna maximize growth for the city, create a great culture, walkable community, and will preserve our housing stock.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
I think we got to capitalize on the opportunity. Edina's choosing to, and there's just lots of great development in the area. You said thousands of, maybe more residents right in our backyard. We have to market our city and market to those businesses and say there's a large populace right next door that can bring their money here and support our local businesses. Our number one concern has to be the safety. I mean, when I walk that street, I look at those houses and I fear like there's a lot of people there, and if they're younger, maybe it gets out of control. I'm fearing for the safety side, but we have to capitalize on the opportunity that there's development and growth. When you see cranes in the air, you can see growth and economic mobility upwards. So we have to take advantage, work to bring that money and that populace over to businesses in our area, and make sure that we're all safe. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I know with all the growth that's been happening in Edina with these really extraordinarily high-rise buildings, there's been a lot of frustration on the Richfield side because there's a definite impact. There's shadowing of the private single-family homes. I think we have to, of course, always understand that we only have so much leeway in controlling that because, we're not Edina. We don't control what they do, but we could be a strong voice for that. As far as developing on the Richfield side, I think there's directly on the border, I think there's very kind of somewhat limited opportunities. I mean, there's single-family private homes there. We're certainly not going to be in a situation of advocating for displacing those people. I certainly wouldn't advocate for that. And I would guess I would concur that I think our focus, our main priority is looking at that Penn Central, Penn Avenue corridor area. That's, I think, our greatest opportunity for developing a unique, vibrant avenue filled with independent businesses, eateries, bakeries, something that really responds well to the local neighborhood.
Thank you. The next question is, many immigrants in Richfield have become afraid for their personal safety under the new federal administration. How would you protect these residents? Should we become a sanctuary city? For this question, we'll start with Mr. Olson.
Yeah, I had coffee with Chief Jay, I think is Henthorn. I'm probably butchering his name, and he's got a great head on his shoulders. He's got a great. He said, we're not ICE. We're not out there looking for illegal immigrants or anything. But if they break the law and there's an ICE record for them, then they're going to follow the law. I think we have to have law in place and allow our police to do their job. I think that's a great stance to have, to say we're not actively looking and knocking on doors and stopping people and asking them for their papers. That's not our goal. Our goal is to keep people safe, make sure if they break the law that they come under that penalty and go through the process. But that's got to be our goal, and I think Chief Jay has done a good job of having those open discussions, that forum, and we as leaders need to be stepping out in the community and letting our residents know that you can be safe here. This is a welcoming community. We just want to make sure everybody's safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, I think our chief has taken some good steps to create some good communication. We do not have an interest in infecting federal policy here in Richfield. We want to protect our citizens, and so I met with Steve Devich, our city planner, yesterday, and he echoed that message. I think that communicating that to the community is important. One of the ways we can communicate that to the community is continuing the police department's efforts to diversify the police force. I think they've taken good steps. Again, I'll refer to the LEDO program that we helped pioneer, but for administrative reasons, we haven't yet implemented. I think there's an appetite and a desire for the city to move forward. They've taken some steps. We've brought Latino officers on. I think we made our first Somali hire recently, and so continuing to be policed by the community makes it easier to communicate with the community.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I'm very comfortable with our current situation where our local police force does not act as federal agents. I don't think there's a role for them to do that. I think they've got their hands full in handling the simply local policing issues. And we don't want them to act as federal agents in this respect because we want to build that sense of trust with people throughout this community. So when they have issues, they can feel comfortable in coming to the police force and not feel like that they're going to be questioned, that they're going to be harassed. So I like the current situation. I think we've got a good situation right now. I think we're working very hard to build trust. I echo the thought that Simon mentioned, that we needed to diversify that police force. We need to get a police force that reflects our community so that we build that trust kind of on a more one-to-one basis.
Thank you. The next question deals with tobacco sales. What are your thoughts about Richfield adopting an ordinance such as Edina has done, restricting tobacco sales to age 21 and over? For this question, we'll start with Mr. Hanson.
This really has been a big issue in the news here this past week or so, and I have to admit I find this is somewhat of a distraction issue, and that's kind of an issue I think that is mainly symbolic. It's not really going to have much impact on, the issue of smoking. What I want to do as a city council member is I want to focus on things that are really important to Richfield. Things I want to tackle, that affordable housing issue. I want to make sure our police force, our fire department, our parks are top-notch in this community. Kind of behind the scenes, I've been working with, I volunteer with a nonprofit called Tree Trust. And behind the scenes, I've been working on getting a free tree planting in a Richfield park paid for by Tree Trust. And talking to my friends at Tree Trust, they're saying it's looking very likely in 2018. And so I want to focus on issues that matter to this community and not kind of get involved in these symbolic distraction issues.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, this is a new issue. I read about it for the first time this week. To me, I know it's not new in Edina, but I would tend to agree with Gordon that it would not be. It's not been on my radar. It's not been a priority to me. I of course be willing if our community said this is a problem, we really want to address that. I would be welcome to hearing more about that. But I think there are bigger housing and commercial development and education and public safety, that those are higher priorities.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, I agree. It's a distraction issue, and I wouldn't be for it if I had to decide today. It just limits businesses. Now, maybe our small Super Americas and stations are going to get more business cigarette sales. My father has run convenience stores for the past 25 years, so I've seen it impact. I mean, they get gas, cigarettes, bread, and milk. I mean, that's their bread and butter. That's what brings people in. That's how they make their money. And to raise that, it just be irresponsible. It's a legal product. They set the age. It's been around forever. To change it based on the face value of its effectiveness doesn't make sense. But I agree with prioritizing our city for safety and redevelopment and growth and all that good stuff. Oh, thanks.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and then we'll go to closing remarks. For the last question, do you favor continuing our city policy which takes out houses and trees to route more traffic on our streets? And for this question, we will start with Mr. Olson.
Yeah, I've been pretty vocal about it. I can't stand when we take away houses from our neighborhoods. That's one less, or actually, with 66th Street, that's 12 less families that can participate in our churches, in our schools, in our parks. We have pretty good roads. We have good wide streets. I'm all for making sure we continue to develop those, make sure they're not falling apart, and make sure that we have safe paths for pedestrians and bicyclists. But redeveloping them, taking out trees and houses in an already landlocked city, it just doesn't make sense. And my sister lives in St. Louis Park, and they have tiny streets. And it's hard to even drive one car down those streets sometimes. I think Richfield is pretty lucky to have the space that we do. Thanks.
Mr. Hanson?
Well, as a general policy, I'd be very reluctant to suggest taking out more houses. I think this question is, of course, directed at the 66th Street project, and that was a tough decision, and it was a very, very busy road, and I think there were options to like going to a 3-lane road that, we could have looked at. But very tough decision, and we had to, make a tough decision in that respect. And that's part of being a city council member, is making those very tough decisions. Such a very narrow road. It was hard to see those houses go. My heart broke when they took the trees down. But I think overall, when we kind of get past this and we look at the roadway we have there, we're going to find that it's a much more attractive roadway that's going to be much safer, and safety is really a top issue of mine. So with that safety issue, sometimes you got to make a tough decision, but overall, I'd be very, very reluctant to ever suggest taking more homes.
Thank you. Mr. Troutman?
Yeah, I would be reluctant, and I know the former council member that held this seat voted against that, and the other member of the council that lived in our ward also voted against it. It's a really tough decision, one that I don't relish, but I won't make a promise in the future. I think it would be imprudent to say never will we ever take another home in Richfield. It really is a case by case situation. We have to look at the opportunities. We have to look at how people are treated. We got to make sure people are treated fairly, and it's painful. It's a difficult decision. So I wouldn't say never, but I would say very gingerly, very cautiously.
Thank you. We'll now go to closing statements. And for this, we will start with Mr. Troutman.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this. This has been a lot of fun, and really appreciate that. It's just one of the great privileges that I have to live in a community that I grew up in, that my family has participated in, and to have the opportunity to continue to serve as a business owner, as a nonprofit leader, and as someone who just enjoys connecting with neighbors. It would be a privilege to serve you, and I respectfully ask for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you again for holding this, and that was a tremendous amount of questions. So that's awesome participation from everybody. Hopefully everybody at home can participate too. But I've lived here 10 years at Apple. Steve Jobs used to have a saying, you know, we pick technologies that are in their spring, not in their fall. And I think Richfield is in their spring. We're rising up. We're becoming well diverse. We're getting economic growth. We have a ripe opportunity to take advantage of that and brand ourselves as that vibrant community that's part of the Twin Cities Metro. And with my Apple background, technology, I've started a couple of small businesses, so I'm an entrepreneur in that regard. I think that youthfulness that I want to bring and attract the families is important to our revitalization and important to that continuing progress for our city. So I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Well, I'd like to also thank the League of Women Voters, and I'd like to thank my fellow candidates. And I just want to say I think we've got a great slate of candidates here, and I consider these gentlemen not to be my opponents, but to be my friends. With regard to, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 3.5 years for the course of this term. There's issues that are going to come up that we never could have dreamed of today. But I want to share with you some guiding principles that I have in how I will approach things. I believe in programs and amenities that bring people together in a sense of community. I think the laughter of children makes a community strong, and I'm going to work very hard to make this a premier community for raising a family. I want this to be a place for all generations, from young people up to senior citizens. I promise to be a strong negotiator with the interests of Richfield at heart. And I would represent Richfield be that strong voice representing Richfield at all sorts of community workshops. Richfield will not be silent if I'm on the city council, and I would like to ask for your vote.
Thank you. And I will turn it over to Susan Rosenberg, our president, for concluding remarks.
Well, I just want to take this time to thank the candidates. I want to thank my timekeepers up here. We had Aaron DeFries, and Karen Jenkins, Donna Drummond. We couldn't have done it with all of us here together, but we really appreciate your time. And I don't think we've ever had that many questions. It was really great. I think we really see a really broad spectrum here. I really appreciate all the participation with everybody here. And then I hope that everybody watches it on the video. And the other thing is vote. That's what we want. We want voters. And you can go right out here and vote at any time that the city council chambers are open. But please vote. And again, thank you. And you all did wonderful jobs. Thank you.